macro shooters, this is Mike from Underwater Macro How-To, and today I'm going to talk through seals. How do you clean them? Where are they? What do they do? I want to start with a little bit of an anecdote. So here in my lap I've got this. This is a PT-056. It's the Olympus housing for a TG4. The first time I used a TG4, I borrowed one from a friend of mine, and it came like this. But the seal, in this case, the seal is this red, I'll flip it this way, is this red object that's around here. It's a silicone seal. The seal came off inside of a Ziploc bag that was inside of the housing. So as I got it, I never used it before. I got the housing, I got the camera, I opened up the housing, there was this thing, I didn't know what it was, in a Ziploc bag. I set that off to the side, slapped the camera inside the housing, closed it up, went on a dive. I lasted all of 10 seconds, took the camera underwater, and I could see the water filled up, that flooded the housing with water, salt water, in fact. It was rather humorous. Killed my dive. I had to come out, drain it, blow it out with air, and set it up for the next dive. The good thing about the TG series, and that's always a selling point with them, is that the camera itself is waterproof down, I forget, I have to check, it's 15 meters or feet. And so if you get a little bit of water in it, it's not a big deal. The only real problem you have to worry about is after you clean out the housing, when the camera heats up while it's running, it creates condensation, and you'll have condensation and moisture on the inside of the lens. So sometimes that ruins your image quality. Okay, but let me switch and show you what I'm working on with seals. Now, normally I have a kit that I carry inside of my travel kit. It's just this bag. I got it free from Nauticam with the housing purchase. It's just a simple Ziploc bag. That's all it is. Inside of that, I carry a variety of things. So this is a set of seals, both a port seal and a main housing seal for my G9. These, you'll see a bunch of them. Rounded seals. These are seals for my dive torches, focus lights, things like that. This is a set of the little rubber traction inserts for zoom gears. We'll talk about that at some point. This is batteries for the housing, so the leak detection system on a Nauticam housing. This is a O-ring grease from CNC, so that came with my strobes, and I'll talk about the strobes. And this one, which is the official Nauticam O-ring grease. Okay. Now these come with suitability. So most housings use silicone rubber O-rings. Okay. And the Nauticam works on the silicone and rubber. It also works on the Nauticam ones. I'll talk those in a minute. The CNC is made for silicone and rubber. They don't say it on the tube, but when you get a brand new one, it comes with the warning right here, and I'll read it. It says, for use only with silicone O-rings. Okay. Now, the Nauticam housings themselves, their O-rings is this, it's this gray material. This gray material is nitrile. Okay, so it's a nitrile O-ring. You can't use the CNC grease on the Nauticam seals, but you can use the Nauticam grease on everything else. Let me flip it so you can read the logo. You can use the Nauticam grease on any kind of seal. Okay? So that's why you'll see, even with the Olympus TG housings, this silicone seal, you can still use the Nauticam seal on it. So in theory, I could take this out of my kit. I could just carry with this, but since this came free with my setup, I just keep it and use it for anything that's not my Nauticam housings. Okay. The other thing that I didn't talk about that I have here is the Nauticam tool. So this comes with a housing. I think it comes with ports. I have a couple of these running around the house. But it's just a simple, it's like a guitar pick. I guess you could use a guitar pick if you had to. But it's really simple. All it is for taking seals off. You just stick it like this inside of the crack next to the seal, and then twist it, and then trace it around. So it's just like if you've taken off a bicycle tire, it's like the tire levers that you use, same kind of thing, you take it off. Okay? As far as tools when I do this, I usually have 3 tools. The first one is my pick, or my O-ring tool, if you will. I usually carry a, it's just a squeezer air, it shoots air out the end when you squeeze it. Okay, I don't even know what they're called. And one last thing, which is a towel. In this case, I've got the really awesome lobster towel. But these are cheap. It's like a cheap beach towel, and they're not really comfortable. It's not very plush, which is actually a selling point for me, because the bigger plush towels, when you rub an O-ring on them, you actually you have pieces of fuzz that come off of the towel and get stuck on the O-ring, and that's definitely what I don't want. So I want some kind of towel material. You could easily use a hand towel. Maybe a full beach towel is a little bit overkill, but I use the beach towels because I'm usually diving, swimming. I bring a towel with me, so I use this after a dive. So I always have it kind of ready. Just make sure that it's clean when you use it on your O-rings, and the reason is that if it's not clean, you'll transfer sand. And when you clean these, and you should clean these after the main ones on the main housing seal, I do after every dive, or if I use a camera, I'll do something like use my camera for 2 dives, and then after that we go take a break. That's normally what happens in anywhere in Southeast Asia. I think most dive operators in the tropics, you go do 2 dives, you take a break. I'll clean O-rings during the break. Okay. Plus, I need to swap batteries. I need to download photos, all of that stuff. So really, anytime I open up that camera, I'm going to take and clean my O-rings. Now, what I do is I just take the O-ring, I take the towel, and I just grab it like this and sort of make a clamp with my hand with the O-ring inside, and then I just pull that O-ring through the towel. I'm feeling it with my free hand while I do this, and I'm checking for 2 things. The first one is, can I feel any grit or sand? It's usually sand on that O-ring as I pull it through. And in this case, I can't. The second thing that I'm doing is as I pull it, I give it a little stretch. And what I'm looking for is a place that's not as stretchy, so it's a little bit harder, it's harder to pull, or someplace, which is the more likely case, where that O-ring has a lot of extra stretch. And that both of those conditions tell me that maybe that O-ring is getting old and I need to swap it out with a new one because it's about ready to fail. Okay. In any case, it can't actually do the job. So I'll run the O-ring through my finger like this, set it off to the side. If I'm in an area that, like maybe on a picnic bench, an area that has a lot of extra dirt lying around, I'll probably do the O-ring last, because as soon as I'm done with it, I'm going to grease it and put it back into the housing. Okay. The next thing that I do is I take this and I fold it over to make sort of a corner. I put it inside of this gap where the O-ring goes, and I will walk it around. If I can do this without being too crazy, I will walk it around and through and trace that groove where the O-ring goes. Now you might have to, if it's a very dirty, like you've been doing a muck dive where you're laying around on the sandy bottom, or if you had a really rough entry and exit, or dropped your camera, anything like that, you might have a lot of sand packed in there. So you might have to trace that groove, break it, find another spot on your towel, run it around again. Just keep repeating that until you get all of the sand out of that crack. And the reason that I'm worried about that particular groove is that when I close this housing, okay, when I close the housing, if there is sand in that little groove, it will make a gap between the seal. The seal fits between this spot here on the inside. Let me do it back here. This spot here and this groove. Okay? And if you close up the housing, you can see exactly in that where that leaves that gap. And so if you have sand gets stuck in here, especially on this part, in that groove or here where it mates. And that sand will create a gap, and you will get air originally, and then when you dive, especially under pressure, and you know this, you're a diver, the deeper you go, the more pressure there is on the outside of the housing, and the more likely you are to get water coming through that gap that piece of sand made. Okay, so I'll clean that gap or clean that groove. I will go take my towel and clean this little, it's like the tray piece where the O-ring and the groove fit into. Clean that out with a towel. You have to be careful sometimes with this one, or with this side, that when you clean this little tray right here, that you don't knock sand into the housing, because sand inside the housing could get on the top of your glass, and then you'll have a piece of sand in all your pictures. That's less than optimum. So what I sometimes do is, after I've cleaned off this tray, I'll go in and clean the inside of the housing like this. So I just use my finger, wrap my finger inside of the towel like this, use that to clean stuff, and then I will turn the housing opening down using the hand blower. Okay. I will also stick it, I'm moving this like this so you can see it, but I do it all upside down. And by that, what I do is I stick it inside of the cracks like this. Okay, so you see that without, and then I'll stick it inside of the crack, blow it. Okay, do that with pretty much anything that's a mechanism. Just touch it into the equipment, turn it upside down, give it 3 or 4 squeezes. Another cool tool that you can get is an adapter. So you take a regular regulator set, and on your quick attach hose that you use for your inflator or your dry suit, there's a little adapter that you can plug right into that, which allows you an air nozzle, just like filling up a basketball or filling up your tires. So that way you can get a lot more pressure coming out of that to air out the inside of your housing, okay, or blow out the inside of your housing. Okay. Once I have that all done, then I'm ready for my my grease. Now you can put too much grease in there. If you have too much grease, it'll act just like a piece of sand, and it'll create a gap in between your O-ring and either this piece of the housing or this piece of the housing, and it won't seal back together. So what I do is I take a piece for something like a TG. You want a little bit, it's like a piece of rice, okay? Maybe about the size of a piece of rice. Put that on your finger, and then I'll do a rough, like just do a little dab here, a little dab there. Okay. And just kind of dab it as I go along. Then I take my fingers and make a little triangle with my fingers around, and then I will pull that housing or pull that O-ring through my fingers. Okay. And I will do that and you're maybe doing 5, 6 loops through your fingers. What I'm really looking for is the feel. I want to feel here with my other hand as I pull on that ring. I want to feel that O-ring is relatively well lubricated and that it's even. Okay. Once I have that, I still have goop on both of my fingers. I'll just place a corner, Okay, place the 3 corners and then stretch back out over the other side. Take my hands that are now gooped up, clean it. Then take my camera, place it inside the housing, and close up the housing. Okay? At this point, I'm not going to open this up again. Okay? So make sure that before you clean this up, you deal with your camera first. You put in your battery, you download your photos, you put it all together. You put your SD card or whatever your storage is back in your camera. You put in a fresh battery so that after you clean your housing, you're ready to close it all up. Okay? Because once I close this up, I'm not going to touch it. Now at this point, what I would normally do is to take this housing and the camera, go put it in a water tank on the surface, let it sit in the water tank for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, right? Because I still have to get all my diving gear together. This thing's just sitting there. It's not going to go anywhere. And I will let it sit in a tub of water. Before I go dive, I will pick it up, tip it so that, see the plastic, the clear side is here. Tip it and see if any water got into the housing. Okay, that's just a simple, it's just a simple leak test to do before diving. Check to see if there's any water inside the housing. If there is, then you have to pull it out and deal with it because you're not safe to actually take this camera diving if you have a leak that you notice while you're on land with just a leak test. Okay, so that's it for this housing. Let me seal this back up so I don't leave a mess. Okay, let me set him off to the side. Okay. With my TG5 housing, so this is a Nauticam NA-TG5, same thing I use. You've seen it in all my videos, I think. With this one, okay, the differences between this one and that one. So for starters, this has the nitrile O-ring, like everything Nauticam. O-ring tool still works, maybe. Operator error here for this second. Okay, but you have, right? So I've got the nitrile O-ring. I've got a little bit of sand on this one. Same kind of thing, but you can only use the Nauticam lubricant because it's a nitrile O-ring. Okay. Other than that, the process is exactly the same. You've got the O-ring, you've got the groove, you've got this piece, the O-ring and the groove that fits into kind of that top tray in this piece of the housing, so you have to clean that off. You clean the groove, you clean the O-ring. The one more difficult thing on this, and you'll see it's even worse on the G9 housing, is that it has a lot of pieces inside of the housing that it's got a lot of just moving parts inside, and those moving parts have a lot of grooves. So let me give you a better picture there. So you've got all of this stuff down here, you've got this stuff, you got this up here. You just have a lot more places where you can accidentally kick sand into the housing, so you have to be very careful at blowing it out, and blow it out a little bit more than you would with the PT-056 or PT-059. Okay. That brings us to, I set him off to the side. That brings us to the G9. So the G9 has tons of O-rings. Okay. The big one that you'll notice is right here, okay, on the main seal of the housing. So that's really easy. This one is actually a little bit thicker. And a bit of advice on this is that this one is thicker than all of the other O-rings that you'll find on this housing. Okay? So and it's a certain size. So you have to be really careful when you get O-rings to mark them so that you know which housing they go to and which part of the housing they go to. Some of them, like the size will be really obvious, right? So like the vacuum seal here has a little tiny one, and there's only one that fits that size. Okay, the ports are all kind of the same size. It's an N85 port. They're all 85 millimeters. This guy, same thing. You've got the tool wherever I put it. I lost it. Anyway, You know the drill at this point, right? You just take the tool, put it in here, slide it around, and you pop it off. Cleans exactly the same way. In this case, the groove is on the main part of the housing, and the back of the housing has the little tray edge that you have to clean off. Okay, and so clean that off. The other thing is with this, like you saw it with the TG5 housing, but with the G9, there's even more widgets and stuff in there to clean out. It's kind of like when I was in the Army and we were cleaning rifles. There's just always more cracks that you can clean. You kind of have to put a limit on how much time am I spending to blow this thing out and to get all the dirt out versus how much or what are the odds that I'm actually going to ruin a picture because of dirt. Okay. Other O-rings on this thing. Okay. I've got an O-ring here where the lens port attaches. Okay. So this guy, there's one right here that runs around. It's smaller than the main housing one, but you have to clean this one off. And this one I will clean usually once per day, unless I'm resting the camera on the bottom, in which case I've noticed that right here on the lens port where it would actually sit on the sand, which is, some people say sitting on the sand is a bad thing, right? But sometimes just the pressure will pack some sand in there. So if I'm doing a lot of muck dives, I will pull this off more frequently and clean it out, but I definitely do it at least once a day if I'm on a diving trip. Okay. There is a, whoops, they're all in the back. There is a seal here on my vacuum system. Okay. But this one isn't as critical. Okay, but it's this little tiny guy right there. You see that gray strip in there? That's a seal. Pull him off. I'll do that once a day. It's not a big deal because it's so small, right? You see how big around it is. It's like maybe a little bit bigger than a dime, maybe a nickel size. Okay. So pull him off and clean him. And then this one here, this is the viewfinder. The viewfinder has a set of O-rings in there. And if you look this way, you've got a big, there's my tool, because I'm going to pull him apart. You've got a big O-ring right here. That just holds the viewfinder in place. Okay. That looks like this. He's a big fat one because he fits over a groove on that viewfinder to hold it in place so that it doesn't slide all the way out of the housing. Okay. Once you take that off, then you can press with your fingers. Okay. Sometimes takes a little bit of effort, but you can pull this out, and you'll see right. I'll use this tool as a pointer. Right here, there is a groove, and that groove holds that big black O-ring. He fits right in there. So you have to clean the O-ring, and you have to clean this groove, and you have to clean this hole right here in the back of the housing. Additionally, there are two O-rings, one right here, okay, and one right next to it. And these two O-rings actually fit on this stainless steel piece on the back of the housing and keep the water from coming inside the housing. So these ones you have to clean. Honestly, I don't clean these as much. I'll clean them maybe every other day. It takes a little bit of effort to pull the back off and more likely to put the back on. That's the hard part because there's a flat spot right here on the viewfinder that fits in, and it has to fit exactly in the appropriate flat spot here on the back of the housing, and it takes a little bit of effort to get it in there and get it right. Okay, and I got it. Okay, and then that thing just goes back on like this. Okay. One last thing that we should talk about is the CNC. So this is a YSD2 CNC strobe. Strobes have an O-ring here on it's this big purple thing. They have an O-ring on the back of the battery compartment. So that's where the batteries, if you've never seen these before, That's where AA batteries go. You take 4 AA batteries. But this thing has an O-ring, and for some reason the design of this is absolutely horrible to clean. The this is not so bad. You can pull this off, you can pull the O-ring out, you can run the towel through the grooves, you can clean it out, you can clean the O-ring, that's no problem. This thing right here is the biggest pain in my life because it's a much smaller groove than a housing back is. And so as a result, there's not a lot of space that I can stuff a towel in there. All right, so I can do this. And these things, for some reason, my strobes get just drugged through the sand. I think it's because they're hanging off the camera like this. And a lot of times when you're moving the camera in, trying to get pictures and stuff, these things are out on the side and they have a habit of getting dug into the sand, or getting pulled backwards into the sand. And so I found my my strobes get really, really dirty. But these things I'll pull out and clean, and I'll clean them just as often as I do the main seal and the housing. So, after every 2 dives or anytime I swap batteries, I'll clean these out. Okay. Another thing that helps, just as a side point, is if you have maybe the cheaper set of Q-tips, they're not as soft, and so they don't lose fuzz as much as the big fluffy premium Q-tips. But you can stick Q-tips in here and clean out this groove of your strobes, and it might be a trick that will save you a little bit of effort at some point. Okay, but that is it, and that is all that I know about O-rings. Seems to be quite a bit, apparently. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.